They say the most dangerous place to fall in love is right next to someone who will never love you back. For 3 years, I believed that. For 3 years, I kept my heart locked away, convinced my best friend would never see me the way I saw her. I was wrong. Sometimes it takes breaking something, an arm, a wall, a carefully constructed lie to discover that the person you've been loving in silence has been loving you back all along. This is the story of how a simple favor became the moment everything changed. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. Not the dramatic kind that wakes you in the middle of the night, but the ordinary kind that usually means someone is running late for coffee. But when I heard Maya's voice on the other end, I knew immediately that something was wrong. "Eli," she said, and that single word carried a frustration so deep it was almost physical. "I've done something incredibly stupid." My heart did its usual flip in my chest. For 3 years, I'd been trying to train that foolish heart to stay calm whenever Maya was near. But it never listened. It never learned. I leaned against my kitchen counter, picturing her on the other end of the line. I could see her so clearly, that little line appearing between her eyebrows when she was frustrated, her strong hands probably gesturing in the air even though no one could see her. "Stupid how?" I asked, keeping my voice steady and calm. It was my role in our friendship. I was the anchor to her occasional storm. Maya was the most competent person I knew. She was a landscape architect who could command construction crews and coax life from dead soil with equal authority. But every so often, the universe reminded her she was human. "I fell," she said, biting out the words. "Off a ladder. A stupid 2-step ladder in my own kitchen, trying to reach the good olive oil." There was a pause, and I could hear the deep, self-critical sigh that followed. "I broke my arm. My right arm. Of course." The bird in my chest stopped flapping and simply fell. "Oh, Maya, are you okay? Where are you?" I was already grabbing my keys, my half-finished graphic design project forgotten on the screen. "I'm home. Just got back from urgent care. They've got me in this ridiculous sling. I look like a failed Civil War reenactor." A sliver of her usual dry humor. A good sign. "But listen," she continued. "The reason I'm calling, I need a favor. A really, really weird favor." Maya's apartment was usually a sanctuary of controlled order. Clean lines, thriving plants that seemed to pose for magazines, and the lingering scent of good coffee and something earthy, like rain on soil. Today, it felt different. A jacket was thrown over a chair. Mail was scattered on the table, and Maya herself was standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost. Her dark hair, usually tied back in a neat knot, was falling in loose strands around her face. The white sling holding her right arm looked stark and clinical against her gray t-shirt. It was a symbol of vulnerability on a woman who seemed to have none. She gave me a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," she said softly. "Thanks for coming." I dropped my bag by the door and moved toward her. My hands felt useless. I wanted to smooth her hair back, to check the wrap on her arm, to do something, anything that involved touching her, but I just clenched my hands at my sides. "Of course. How bad is it? Do you need anything? Food? Painkillers?" She shook her head, gesturing toward the kitchen with her good hand. "I'm fine, just angry, and uncaffeinated." She paused, and a small smile appeared. "Coffee?" It was our ritual. No matter the crisis or celebration, everything began with coffee at her oversized kitchen island. I nodded, relieved to have a task. I knew where everything was. I ground the beans, the whirring noise filling the strained silence. I filled the kettle. The motions were familiar and soothing. I could feel her watching me as I worked. Her presence was a heavy weight at my back. I arranged 2 mugs on the counter, her favorite dark blue one and my usual chipped white one. When I turned around with the French press, she was still standing in the same spot, her gaze distant. The confident, grounded woman I knew had been replaced by this fragile stranger, and the sight of it made my own carefully constructed walls feel dangerously thin. Something had been dislodged in her, and I feared it was dislodging something in me, too. We sat at the island, steam rising from our mugs like a temporary shield between us. For a few minutes, we just drank. The silence stretched until it was thin and humming. I waited. With Maya, you always had to wait. She organized her thoughts the way she organized a garden plan, everything needing its proper place before she could present it. Finally, she set her mug down with a soft click. "Okay," she said, not looking at me but at her own hand wrapped in its sling. The favor. I braced myself. I'd run through a dozen scenarios on the drive over. She needed me to drive her somewhere, type her emails, help her with some impossible plant emergency. "My cousin is getting married. On Saturday," she began, her voice flat. "I'm a bridesmaid. I have the dress, the shoes, the whole ridiculous pastel ensemble. But with this," she gestured to her arm, "there are certain grooming practicalities that are suddenly impossible." I still wasn't following. "Like doing your hair?" I offered, picturing myself fumbling with a curling iron. A bitter little laugh escaped her. "I wish. No, it's stupider than that. More intimate." The bird in my chest gave a violent, hopeful flutter. I immediately crushed it. "Stop it! She's your straight best friend who is in a bind." "Maya, you can ask me anything. You know that." She finally lifted her eyes to meet mine. They were dark with embarrassment. "I need you to shave my legs." The words hung in the air, mundane and yet monumental. The steam from the coffee seemed to solidify. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears. Shave her legs. A task so routine, so normal. And yet the thought of it, of being that close to her, of having my hands on her skin sent a jolt of pure terror and unadulterated longing through me. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Oh," I said, my voice a squeak. I cleared my throat and tried again, aiming for breezy nonchalance. "Yeah, of course. No problem." The bathroom was small, a cage of white tile and chrome that immediately felt 100 degrees too hot. Maya had insisted on showering first, alone, fumbling awkwardly with her one good hand. I'd waited in the living room, trying to read a magazine and failing. Every nerve ending was alive and electric. Now the space was filled with damp, floral-scented steam that clung to my clothes and hair. Maya was perched on the closed lid of the toilet, wrapped in a large, fluffy towel. Her injured arm rested carefully in her lap, the sling temporarily discarded. Her good leg was propped up on a small stool she'd brought in. Her skin, still damp and flushed from the shower, seemed to glow in the soft light. I felt like an intruder, a voyeur in a sacred space. My job was simple: be a friend. My body, however, was staging a full-scale rebellion. My hands trembled as I lined up the tools on the edge of the sink. A sleek, heavy razor I'd never seen before. A can of shaving cream that smelled of sandalwood and something sharp and clean. It smelled like her. "Ready?" I asked, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the small room. She gave a curt nod, her jaw tight. She was looking at the floor, a curtain of damp hair hiding her expression. I knelt before her. The cold tile was a shock through the knees of my jeans. The position felt strangely ceremonial, like a worshiper at an altar. I dispensed a cloud of the shaving cream into my palm. It was cool and impossibly soft. Taking a breath, I reached out and began to smooth the foam over her calf. The first touch was lightning. Her skin was warm, firm, and alive under my palm. A muscle in her leg jumped a tiny, involuntary reaction. "Sorry," I mumbled. "No, it's fine," she whispered, her voice strained. "Just cold." But it wasn't cold. It was electric. A current passing from her skin to my fingertips, traveling up my arm and short-circuiting my brain. I picked up the razor. Its weight was a strange comfort in my unsteady hand. I had to focus. This was a task, a mechanical process. Long, steady strokes, Don't press too hard. Rinse the blade. I started at her ankle, drawing the razor upward in a smooth, careful line. It left a clean path through the white foam. My entire world narrowed to that single strip of skin, to the whisper of the blade, the warmth of her leg, the heavy, sandalwood-scented air in my lungs. I was so close I could see the faint constellation of freckles on her knee, a tiny, faded scar just below it. Details I had no right to know, to memorize. I worked in silence, my movements becoming more confident, more rhythmic. Lather, stroke, rinse. Lather, stroke, rinse. It became a meditation, a mantra against the screaming chaos in my head. This is just a favor. She trusts you. Don't make it weird. Don't let her see. Don't let her know that this simple, clinical act feels like the most intimate thing I have ever done. I could feel her gaze on the top of my head, but I refused to look up. If I met her eyes, I knew my own would betray me. I would be laid bare, and the fragile architecture of our friendship would crumble into dust. So I focused on my work, on the geography of her leg, the curve of her calf, the dip behind her knee. I was an artist, a cartographer, mapping a territory I knew I could never claim. The thought was a familiar ache, a dull throb that had become the background music of my life. But here, now, with the undeniable reality of her skin under my hands, the ache was sharp, acute, almost unbearable. I was drowning, and I wasn't even fighting it. I was letting the water fill my lungs, because for a moment, it felt exactly like breathing. When I finished the first leg, I rinsed the razor in my hands. The running water was a welcome distraction. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself for the second round. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Other one." Maya shifted, placing her other foot onto the stool. As I reached for the shaving cream again, my hand brushed against her ankle. It was the briefest of contacts, skin against skin, but it felt like I'd laid my palm on a live wire. I flinched, pulling my hand back as if burned. "Sorry," I muttered again. The word felt stupid and inadequate. She didn't say anything, but when I dared a quick glance at her face, her expression was unreadable. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. I felt a flush of shame creep up my neck. I was making this weird. I was the one turning this act of friendly charity into something charged and strange. I had to get it together. I applied the foam to her other leg with a detached efficiency. My movements were brisk and impersonal. I would finish this, and then I would escape this tiny, suffocating room. I would go home and pretend this never happened. Pretend that my hands didn't still tingle with the memory of her skin. I worked faster this time. The razor flew. My focus was absolute. I refused to let myself feel anything. I was building a wall inside my head, brick by painful brick. Ankle, calf, knee, just a leg, just skin and bone and muscle. It means nothing. It's just a favor for a friend, a straight friend. The thought was the final, coldest brick in the wall. I repeated it to myself over and over. Straight, straight, straight. A penance for the crime of my own treacherous heart. I made the final stroke up her thigh. The razor stopped just below the hem of her towel. Done. I rinsed the blade one last time and set it on the counter with a definitive click. The sound echoed in the silence. It was over. I could breathe again. I pushed myself up from my knees. My joints cracked in protest. My entire body was screaming with the need to flee. "All set," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that sounded painfully false. "Good as new. You'll be the belle of the pastel bridesmaid ball." I was turning to leave, to give her privacy to dress, to put as much distance between us as the small apartment would allow. I needed air. I needed to be anywhere but here, with the ghost of her touch still humming on my fingertips and the scent of sandalwood clinging to me like a second skin. But then a hand closed around my wrist. Her good hand. Her grip was gentle but firm, an undeniable anchor. "Eli, wait." Her voice was low and thick, and it stopped me cold. I froze, my back to her, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped thing. I couldn't turn around. I couldn't face her. I was terrified of what I would see in her eyes. Pity, maybe, or discomfort. The dawning, awkward realization of my feelings, which I was sure were written all over my face, reflected in my every trembling movement. This was it. The moment I'd dreaded for 3 years. The moment the friendship would be irrevocably broken by the weight of my unspoken want. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the gentle but firm rejection that would surely follow. "Please," she whispered. Her thumb stroked the sensitive skin of my inner wrist, a simple, devastating gesture that shattered my carefully constructed walls into a million pieces. Slowly, as if moving through water, I turned to face her. She was still sitting on the toilet lid, but she'd leaned forward. Her expression was one of raw, unguarded vulnerability. All the defenses were gone. The dry humor, the competent authority, the careful distance, it had all been stripped away, leaving something honest and aching in its place. Her dark eyes, usually so clear and direct, were clouded with an emotion I couldn't name, but it looked terrifyingly like my own. Her thumb continued its slow, hypnotic circle on my wrist. "Do you have any idea," she started, her voice cracking on the last word, "what it's like? Watching you?" I couldn't breathe. The air in the room was too thick, too heavy. "Watching me what?" I whispered, the words barely audible. "Just be," she said. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "Watching you move around my kitchen like you belong there. Watching you concentrate on your work. Watching you try so hard not to let me see how you feel." My breath hitched. She knew. Of course she knew. How could she not? I was a terrible actor. My heart was a clumsy amateur, performing a one-woman show on a brightly lit stage. I tried to pull my hand away. A sudden, desperate need for escape was overwhelming me, but her grip tightened. "Don't," she said, her voice firm again. The command cut through my panic. "Don't run away. Not this time." She used her hold on my wrist to pull me closer, until I was standing between her knees. The damp heat of her body radiated through my jeans. The towel had slipped slightly, revealing the pale, smooth skin of her collarbone. My gaze was fixed on the hollow of her throat, where a tiny pulse beat a frantic rhythm. It matched my own. She lifted her good hand from my wrist and brought it to my face. Her fingers were cool against my flushed cheek. Her touch was hesitant, questioning. I leaned into it, a silent surrender. My eyes fluttered shut. This had to be a dream. A feverish hallucination brought on by steam and sandalwood and years of hopeless longing. But the calloused tips of her fingers tracing the line of my jaw felt undeniably real. "Eli," she murmured, her breath warm against my lips. And then she closed the small distance between us. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. In my dreams, it was always desperate, frantic, a release of pent-up passion. But this was soft, tentative, and achingly tender. It was a question, and I answered by pressing back. My hand came up to rest on her shoulder, careful of her injured arm. The initial softness gave way to a deeper pressure, a slow, thorough exploration that spoke of years of unspoken words and unseen glances. It tasted of coffee and toothpaste, and a sorrow so profound it made my heart ache. It was a kiss that said, "Finally." It was a kiss that said, "I see you." It was the breaking of a dam, the end of a long, lonely drought, the first deep breath of air after being underwater for far too long. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. I opened my eyes and found her watching me. Her own eyes were shining with unshed tears. The small, steamy bathroom felt like the only place in the world. The drip of the faucet was the only sound. I finally found my voice, though it was shaky and unfamiliar. "I thought," I started. The old, tired script was playing out in my head. I thought you were straight. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She just shook her head. A slow, deliberate motion. I thought I was, too, she whispered, her voice thick with revelation. Or maybe I was just building walls. It was easier. Safer. She looked down at her injured arm, then back up at me. It takes doing something stupid, I guess. Breaking something. To realize the whole structure is wrong. The metaphor, so perfectly her, settled deep in my chest. All this time, I'd been the one feeling caged. Trapped by my own feelings. But she'd been in a cage of her own making. We were two prisoners, sitting in adjacent cells, unaware the doors had been unlocked the entire time. I reached out and gently brushed the tear from her cheek with my thumb. Her skin was so soft. "What does this mean, Maya?" I asked. The question hung between us, fragile and new. She captured my hand, lacing her fingers through mine, holding on tight. "It means," she said, her voice gaining strength, gaining the certainty I knew and loved so well. "It means I'm tired of being safe." She squeezed my hand. "It means I've been in love with my best friend for a very long time, and I was just too much of a coward to see it." The confession, so simple and direct, landed in my heart. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, profound sense of peace. The frantic bird in my ribs finally settled. "How long?" I heard myself ask. My voice was barely a whisper. She let out a shaky breath. A small, rueful smile played at her lips. "Remember that night last year? When we went to that terrible restaurant with the even worse jazz band?" I nodded. How could I forget? We'd laughed until we cried, until the staff had politely asked us to leave. "You had this sauce on your chin," she continued, her thumb tracing circles on my palm. "And you were laughing so hard you couldn't breathe." And I thought, her voice caught. I thought, this is the person I want to see every day for the rest of my life. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest, something that felt like breaking and healing at the same time. But then the thought terrified me. She continued, "Because you were my best friend, and I couldn't risk losing you. So I buried it. I pretended it was just friendship, just admiration, just—" She shook her head. "Anything but what it actually was." I understood. God, I understood so completely it hurt. 3 years, I said softly. "I've loved you for 3 years." Her eyes widened. Fresh tears spilled over. 3 years? I nodded, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Since the day you brought me soup when I had the flu. You sat on my couch and made me watch terrible reality TV. And you didn't care that I looked like death. You just—" I swallowed hard. "You just stayed. Eli." My name was a prayer on her lips. She pulled me closer until our foreheads touched. Her breath mingled with mine in the small space between us. "We've wasted so much time," she whispered. "No," I said firmly, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "Not wasted. We needed that time. To be friends first. To build something solid." I pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "And now we have something worth protecting." A smile broke across her face. A real one this time. The kind that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "When did you become the wise one?" I laughed, a genuine, light sound that felt foreign after the tension of the past hour. "I have my moments." She kissed me again, softer this time, sweeter. Like she had all the time in the world and intended to use every second of it. When we parted, I rested my hand on her good shoulder. "We should probably get you dressed," I said. Practical, despite the way my heart was still racing. "Unless you plan to attend the wedding in a towel," she groaned, the spell broken slightly by the reminder of reality. The wedding? God, I'd almost forgotten. "How's the arm feeling?" I asked, concern flooding back. "Like I fell off a ladder," she said dryly. "But better." Everything feels better. She stood carefully, balancing with her good arm. The towel stayed mercifully in place. I averted my eyes, suddenly shy despite everything that had just happened. I should, I gestured vaguely toward the door, give you some privacy. Eli. Her voice stopped me again, but this time there was laughter in it. I think we're past that now, don't you? Heat flooded my face. I don't want to assume. She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. I need help getting dressed, she said simply. The sling makes everything complicated. Will you stay? It wasn't really a question. Not with the way she was looking at me, like I was something precious, something worth keeping. Of course, I said. Always. We moved to her bedroom. A space I'd been in 100 times before, but it felt different now, charged with new meaning. She directed me to her closet, where the bridesmaid dress hung in protective plastic. A pale lavender monstrosity, with more tulle than any garment had a right to possess. Your cousin has interesting taste, I observed, pulling it from the hanger. Maya snorted. My cousin has terrible taste, but I love her, so I'm wearing the purple cupcake. I helped her into the dress, navigating the zipper and the layers of fabric with careful hands. My fingers brushed against her bare back, and I felt her shiver. Cold? I asked, though I knew it wasn't the temperature. No, she said softly. Just you. The intimacy of the moment, so different from the bathroom but equally profound, made my chest tight. When she was finally dressed, I stepped back to look at her. Even in the ridiculous dress, she was beautiful. Her dark hair was still damp, falling in waves around her shoulders. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were bright. You're staring, she said, but she was smiling. I'm allowed to now, I replied. The words felt brave, bold, like I was claiming something I'd been denied for too long. Yes, she agreed, her smile widening. You are. She sat on the edge of her bed, careful of the dress. Come here. I crossed the room and sat beside her. She reached for my hand with her good one, intertwining our fingers. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of what? Of messing this up. Of losing you if it doesn't work. I squeezed her hand. You won't lose me. Even if... I couldn't finish the thought. Couldn't imagine a scenario where this didn't work. Even if things get complicated, you won't lose me. I promise. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I could feel the weight of her, the reality of her. I don't know how to do this, she confessed. I've never with a woman. Neither have I said. Not really. A few fumbling attempts in college, but nothing that mattered. Nothing like this. So we'll figure it out together? Together, I confirmed. We sat in comfortable silence for a long moment. The afternoon light was filtering through her curtains, painting everything in soft gold. The wedding is in 2 days, Maya said eventually. I'll be gone most of the day. Bridesmaid duties and all that. I know. But after? She lifted her head to look at me. Come with me to the reception. As my date. My heart did a complicated flip. Are you sure? Your family will be there. Your cousin. I'm sure, she said firmly. I'm done hiding. Done pretending. I want them to know. I want everyone to know. The conviction in her voice made me brave. Then yes, I'd love to. She kissed me again. Slow and deep and full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, she was grinning. I can't believe I broke my arm and got the girl. I laughed. Maybe you should fall off ladders more often. Absolutely not. Once was terrifying enough. She stood, pulling me up with her. Help me with my shoes. I knelt before her again. But this time it was different. This time there was no fear, no desperate attempts to hide my feelings. Just the simple act of helping someone I loved. I slipped the delicate heels onto her feet, buckling the tiny straps with careful fingers. Perfect, I said, standing. She wobbled slightly, her balance thrown off by the sling. I steadied her with a hand on her waist. I've got you. I know, she said, and the way she looked at me with complete trust, with open affection, made everything worth it. The 3 years of silence, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment. I should probably go home, I said reluctantly. Let you rest. You need to be ready for the wedding chaos. Or, she countered, you could stay. We could order terrible takeout and watch terrible reality TV. Like we always do. Like we always do, I echoed. Except now I can do this. She kissed me, quick and sweet. And this. Another kiss. And this. A third. Longer this time. I see your point, I managed when she finally released me. Staying sounds good. We ordered Thai food. We settled on her couch, her good side pressed against me. We turned on the television, but neither of us paid much attention to what was playing. Instead, we talked. About everything and nothing. About the years of careful distance. About the moments we'd almost broken. About the future we could finally imagine together. What about your family? I asked at some point, my fingers playing with her hair. They'll be fine, she said confidently. My mom's been asking when I'm going to bring someone to family dinner for years. I think she suspected. And your dad? He'll grumble about not having grandkids. But then I'll remind him that adoption exists, and he'll be planning nurseries before dessert. The casual way she mentioned a future, a real future with possibilities I'd never let myself consider, made my breath catch. Kids? I asked carefully. She turned to look at me, her expression serious. Eventually. Maybe. If you want them. We have time to figure it out. I do, I said. Want them, I mean. Someday. Good, she smiled. Because I think you'd be an amazing mom. The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Work, friends, the ridiculousness of the bridesmaid dress, but underneath it all was a current of joy, of relief, of finally being able to be honest. When the food arrived, we ate straight from the containers. Her injured arm made everything awkward, so I helped her. Fed her bites of pad thai when she couldn't manage the chopsticks. I could get used to this, she teased. Don't. The sling comes off in 6 weeks. Pity. But she was grinning. As the evening deepened into night, the exhaustion of the day caught up with both of us. The emotional weight of everything that had happened. Maya's head grew heavy on my shoulder. Her breathing slowed. Stay tonight, she murmured, half asleep. Please. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. I helped her to bed, helped her out of the dress and into soft pajamas, careful of her arm, gentle with every movement. She was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. I stood there for a moment, watching her. This woman I loved. This woman who loved me back. It didn't feel real. It felt like something I might wake up from, a beautiful dream that would dissolve in the morning light. But then she stirred, reaching for me even in sleep. Eli? I'm here, I said, climbing into bed beside her. She curled into me, her good arm wrapping around my waist. Her head rested on my chest, right over my heart. Love you, she mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. I love you too, I whispered into her hair, and lying there in the darkness, with Maya's breath warm against my skin and her heartbeat steady under my palm, I finally believed it. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a catastrophe. This wasn't an ending. This was home. This was healing. This was the breaking of old walls and the building of something new and strong and true. It wasn't perfect. Her arm was broken. We had a lifetime of questions to answer. But we had each other. And for now, in this moment, that was everything. I closed my eyes and let myself fall into sleep. For the first time in 3 years, the bird in my chest was quiet, settled, at peace. Because it finally knew where it belonged. So that's my story. That's how a broken arm and a simple favor changed everything. For 3 years, I lived in silence, convinced my love was impossible. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone see your heart, even when you're terrified of what they might do with it. If my story touched you, if you've ever loved someone in secret, or if you believe that friendship can become something more beautiful than you ever imagined, I'd love to hear from you. Please like this video and subscribe to Love Beyond Rules for more stories like mine. Tell me in the comments, have you ever hidden your feelings from your best friend? What would you have done in my situation? Do you believe love is worth the risk? Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Share this with someone who needs to know that love doesn't follow rules. Because here's what I learned. The scariest moment isn't when you fall in love. It's when you realize that staying silent hurts more than taking the leap. Thank you for listening to my story.